Welcome to the Gifford Provider Podcast, the podcast of Gifford Healthcare based in Randolph, Vermont. I'm Scott Fleischman. This month, we are speaking with Gifford social worker Emily Pizzale. Emily joined Gifford in 2020. We're going to be touching on several topics today, including our aging population, the financial constraints we currently face, and getting through the holiday season. Before we begin, we're going to tell you a little bit about Gifford. Gifford is a nonprofit critical access hospital and federally qualified health center with a total of 9 locations throughout central Vermont and the Upper Valley. Gifford's main campus is in Randolph, Vermont. It is home to a 24-hour emergency department, inpatient and rehabilitation units, a renowned birthing center, an accredited cancer program, advanced diagnostic imaging, surgery, and much more. If you go to giffordhealthcare.org, you can find our services, our locations, the latest news, blogs, and healthcare information. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to click the subscribe button, like this video, tap the bell for notifications. That way you'll know whenever we have new content available. And right now on our YouTube page, we have Gifford urologist Dr. J. Andrew Dreslin with some important men's health information. November was Men's Health Awareness Month. I'm still kind of sporting the goatee here, growing it out. I'm going to have to trim it in a few days because it's getting to be a little long and scraggly. I thought I'd get it trimmed in time for our podcast today, Emily, but nope, I just kept it out there. So you're going to have this mop, but hopefully go on our YouTube page, check out Dr. Dreslin's videos, very informative. He talks about sexual health, prostate cancer screenings, testicular cancer screenings, and so on. Now, if you are listening to the audio version of the Gifford Provider Podcast, we appreciate that. Also, leave a comment, give us a 5-star review. You can catch us on Amazon, Google, Apple Podcasts as well, Spotify too. So we're kind of on the large major podcast platform. So check us out. We've got about a year and a half worth of episodes on the Gifford Provider Podcast. And one of the very first podcasts I did was with one of Emily's coworkers in the Gifford Psychiatry and Counseling Department, Erica Schleif, talking about mental health as kids get ready to go back to school in the fall of 2021 when COVID was still very rampant. It is still present with us now. We're going to talk about a little bit about that today. But Emily, great for you to join us here, social worker here at Gifford. Tell us how that became an interest of yours.
Yeah, so I came to the field of social work. I had always wanted to be what I thought was a therapist for a long time since I was little. And as I went through school, that morphed into wanting to be a social worker. I did a semester abroad in Cape Town, South Africa, where I worked with social workers there and just kind of fell in love with their approach to providing support and care and mental health, and pivoted my career a little bit from wanting to be exclusively a therapist to wanting to be a social worker and do some other things. That's really how I came to the field of social work. And had always wanted to work in medical social work and work at a hospital. So that's how I came to Gifford.
How long were you in South Africa?
I spent a semester there. So it was about 3.5, 4 months there. Beautiful, great experience. That was a human rights-based semester abroad. So got to see some really cool things there. Got to go on safari. That was cool. And lived in a house with classmates. We all had internships in the human rights fields.
Does a trip like that give you a different perspective on things when you come back?
Definitely. Twofold, getting to experience Cape Town, which is a huge, beautiful city in Africa, is not what most people think of when they think of Africa. So that very much changed my thoughts on that, experiencing or seeing what people experience over there as far as, poverty and famine and some really big issues over there. And then coming back to the U.S. and having that outside perspective on our country was very it was a very important experience for me to have as an undergrad student, and really shaped a lot of the work I've done the last 10 years.
Was there something in your life that pointed you in the direction of therapy at the start?
So my parents are divorced, and we went through family counseling while that was happening. And I just had really good experiences with that counselor, and at a young age, just felt it would be a neat career. And I have always, from a young age, enjoyed helping others. I used to be in youth group and went on volunteer trips and did food drives and things like that. So just to have a job where you get to help people, I can't understand careers where you don't. That doesn't make sense to me. So this is a perfect fit for me, this field.
A member of the Divorced Parents Club. I am one as well. You had that family counseling. It was my parents divorced while I was on spring break in college, my junior year in college. And so I'm home when everything goes down, and then it's like you have to go back to school. Like after going through that, now go back to school and try to act like nothing's changed or nothing's happened. And it was my senior year, I remember, because that made graduation very difficult. And you start to notice how some type of therapy would have probably been helpful, going back to school and having to deal with everything that had gone on at home was not easy for me. It took me a long time to get over that. So you're fortunate to have some family therapy. And, back in the, late 90s, that was not really something you did.
Yeah. I think my parents were pretty on the ball as far as being proactive about that for my brother and I. And it helped. Yeah, because the whole family feels that transition.
My name is Cheryl Tewksbury. I live in Chelsea, and I'm a physical therapy patient at Gifford. I ended up here with a cervical spine exacerbation. Jo at the Sharon Health Center is very caring, attentive. She educates me so that I can also address my pain on my own. I've always relied on Gifford Care. Everyone is very supportive and friendly and communicative between departments. I highly encourage you to consider Gifford. I think they have a holistic approach that addresses all of your needs.
So how did you end up at Gifford?
I was out in Colorado for about 6 years working out there, and I decided to move back to Vermont, sort of right in the height of the pandemic, and just started looking for jobs all over. I was looking a lot in hospice and palliative care. That's where I was working in Colorado, and just sort of stumbled across this opening at Gifford. And I had received care here as a young child. My pediatrician was at Gifford. And so it felt like a good place to come back to.
Your schooling was mostly in New England, right? Connecticut and
Yep. So University of Connecticut for my undergrad, and then Simmons College in Boston for my master's degree.
So there's really nothing like New England, right? I mean, that's kind of like with me too. I moved out west for 4 years growing up in Massachusetts, went out west, but it's like something about New England just keeps calling you back if you're from here.
Yeah, it was a great homecoming. I drive around like a tourist now again and look at the leaves, and I love the 4 seasons, and I love snow and rain. So getting to, take a break from that in Colorado and then coming back to that, it's been a good move.
Coming to a hospital, a new job as a social worker at the start of a pandemic, which no one has any experience in, no one has any history to how to navigate. That must have been difficult.
Yeah, it was a challenge. In addition to the pandemic and then moving home after being gone for so long, I'd never worked in a hospital before at all. So even though I worked in hospice and palliative care and I had some medical background, I was new to the the medical social work field. So navigating all of that at the same time while meeting 200 new coworkers, and you can't see anyone's faces because we're all wearing masks constantly and sometimes face shields and goggles at that time, was pretty crazy. It was a big transition to make all at once.
Talk us through a day for you, what you do here at Gifford. People probably have an idea of what a social worker does, but for those who may not have a sense, especially in the hospital setting, tell us about that.
Yeah. So a typical day, come in, check my emails, catch up on voicemails from the day before, kind of plan out my day. Typically, I do have a couple of scheduled appointments with patients or clients, whether that be a counseling visit or if I'm going to help someone, fill out an advance directive or a Medicaid application. So I usually have parts of my day that are scheduled, and then other parts of my day, I'm more on call. So I am primarily now supporting our primary care department. So a typical day would also include a page from a coworker, from a doctor who's with a patient and they're having a hard time with something, whether that be their mental health or their family's mental health, or, they need housing, they need food assistance, they don't have insurance, they've gone through a divorce, any of those things. And they're just needing some extra support. So I go over and I meet with that person. I see what I can help with in the moment, and I make a plan with them for follow-up, which could look like, I'll call you tomorrow, I'll call you next week, or I want you to come in tomorrow. I'm going to help you get these resources in place. And those relationships are variable. Sometimes they're just very quick one-off interactions, and then other times I'm working with people for months or years at a time. It can really vary, which is one of the things I love about my role, is the variability. It's different every day, and I like that. It works for me.
I'm sure there are days that are tough for you too, as well as some rewarding days. You're able to get somebody where they need to go, or get them connected to people that can help. And then might be other days where it kind of hits you a little bit harder.
There are definitely days where it can feel like the sky is falling and we can't get the systems to work together. Everyone's having a crisis that day. And then there's days where none of that's happening and it's very peaceful, and I'm developing programs and reading books and articles. That varies too, and seems to even out and balance out.
It's my hope that here at Sharon Health Center, we will be able to help you get any level of injury under better control. And if we can't take care of you here, we will definitely get you to the people who can take care of you.
How are you able to balance that? And because you're helping so many other people.
Yeah. So, I think firstly, it's more rewarding than it is stressful to try to help people with some of these big problems. Even though we may not have the perfect resource or the perfect solution or system to fix whatever's going on, we can be there for them. We can listen. We can, have empathy for what they're going through. And that actually, out of everything I do, seems to make the biggest difference to people, is just feeling like, I can vent to you. I feel better. Someone finally knows this. You're the first person I've ever told this to. I hear that all the time. That's actually extremely rewarding. And so I don't feel that I take that on as stress. And then those cases where you actually get to help someone and you find, the miracle cure or the miracle fix, makes the situations where you can't help, it balances it out. You take the wins, and you take the wins as big wins. So that's really the main way. And then I think also doing that, compartmentalizing, not taking it personally, not taking the work home with you as much as possible. Self-care. I do a lot of things to keep myself going, whether that be exercising. I try to get outside for a walk every day. I try to walk every day at work. I eat good foods. I try to work out. I love to read. I love my dogs. These things all help keep us going.
Dogs will help with anything, just to get that greeting when you come home. I mean, that you can erase a miserable day when you get that greeting when you come home from a dog. Okay, so one of the things that you really like to focus on, one of your interests, is our aging population. And you sent me some stats and some numbers that the population of 65 plus will double from 2018 to 2060. That's insane.
Yeah. Our country and really our world is aging very rapidly. We're not replacing folks at the rate that we used to. People are having less kids, for a multitude of reasons. So there's now and is going to be more older people than younger people. And I spend a lot of time working with older folks. That's my population of choice and interest, and working with their caregivers, many of whom are often still working, maybe raising grandkids so that their children can work, and then also taking care of their parents. So there's a lot that comes with that. We've got a lot of older people trying to find caregivers, wanting or trying to move into nursing homes, and there not being beds available or funding to move in there. Thinking that Medicare will take care of the nursing home costs or the caregivers when you do need that, which is not true. And I want everybody to know that Medicare does not pay for caregivers, does not pay for nursing homes. So don't count on that. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I tell people that at least twice a day at work. So those are sort of the things I'm thinking about as far as our aging population.
Without getting too much into the politics of things, why do you think that is?
Medicare... I think, and I know, we're moving in this direction at Gifford, but I think focusing more on population health and the things that really matter, like housing and caregivers and food access, our healthcare and our mental health care, and finding a way to support our older folks wherever, or just our folks wherever they're at in life. As we age, it becomes less about all of these, tests and procedures and things that we can have done. And healthcare becomes more about the basics, our social determinants of health. Again, like our family support systems, the ability to get out and socialize, transportation, and then housing and food, like I mentioned. Those are the things that really become important. And those are the predictors that really impact our health more than anything else, and the length of our lives and the quality of our lives.
Is that something that needs to have the bell rung a little bit more to get people aware of this silver tsunami, as it's called? Is this, there are certain topics, subjects, issues that kind of lay dormant for a while until it's too late. I mean, healthcare, for example, right? The nursing shortage. Like, we knew there was going to be a nursing shortage now 20 years ago. We just saw that coming, and now we're just reacting to it. Similar situation, you think, here?
Definitely. And I think, as much as COVID was a challenge, it was a great time where it really pointed out what we were missing as far as, one of the things that got talked about, I think, quite a bit during COVID was the impacts that social isolation can have on people of any age, but especially on our elderly population, on our older population. It's deadly. It's worse than heart failure. It's worse than COPD or cancer. Being isolated, being alone, if you don't want to be, is not a good thing for anyone. And so I think we did start to talk about that a bit through COVID, and COVID also really pointed out the lack of our safety net as far as caregivers and folks in rural areas without transportation or someone to just come by and check on them. How do they get their groceries if the volunteer who brought the groceries can no longer come? Things like that, COVID really shined a light on, which I think is good, because I think before it was easier to sweep these things under the rug, and now we're realizing these are problems that we need to work on.
So in 2020, the 4 states ranked by percent of population age 65 or older: Maine, Florida, West Virginia, Vermont, right up there. And population in general, it's a small population in Vermont. So to have, that says a lot, right, about how old the population is compared to the rest of the state's population. I mean, it's an issue here.
Yeah, we're an older state, and it's a hard state sometimes to get younger folks to stay in or come back to. We've got a lack of housing. It's rural for the most part, and we don't have the attractions of somewhere like New York City or Denver. So yeah, there's a lot less younger folks here than there used to be. There's a lot more older folks than there used to be. Oftentimes their children are living across the country and trying to take care of mom and dad when they're in Vermont and you're in Washington State or California or Colorado is tough. Although, Zoom and things like that have helped with that. You can meet someone's doctor now that way and be at mom's appointment with her. But Vermont is, we're, as you said, the fourth state with as far as aged population goes.
And I have to imagine now the way that COVID's impact, like you were talking about the impact of COVID, but now we're seeing this inflation impact. It's just making it even more difficult for our aging population to get what they need and be able to afford it.
Right. I mean, our older folks live for the most part on a very fixed income, a very low income. And so it makes a big difference when the price of your food goes up or the price of gas goes up or to replace your vehicle or anything, any day-to-day cost that maybe doesn't impact younger folks as much. You have the ability to go out and get a second job and earn that extra income, even though I wish you didn't have to, but you have the ability to do that. Whereas our older population, they're stuck. The money they bring in is the money they bring in. And it's common for them to have to decide between groceries this week or prescriptions, snow tires or heating fuel. Living in a state like Vermont, it's expensive too. It's beautiful, it's rural and beautiful, but it's far to get to things.
And that generation, when they were younger, I don't think that it was a different time. I don't think, both parents weren't necessarily working. Mother could stay home and father would work. I mean, those were the roles, 65 years ago. And it's something that different that this generation, this older aging generation is just not used to. I mean, today, your generation, my generation are probably the same generation, but we know you can work 2 jobs. Anybody can go, you can go get any job you want. It doesn't matter who you are, you can just work and earn that money and do what you need to do. And then when you act, not only are they not used to that, but then they're older and there's less that they can do. The restrictions are there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about, take your average 80-year-old and the amount of change they've experienced in their lifetime is incredible. And I think that's what makes these older generations resilient and amazing is to watch them continue to adapt and excel. And that's really why I love working with that population. They can change. They have changed so many times, they'll do it again. Sometimes they just need a little hand up or a little support, or they just want to talk about the fact that cell phones weren't around. The internet didn't exist. Both parents didn't work outside of the home. Women couldn't vote. They lived through the Great Depression and wars. And it's amazing to talk to someone from these older generations and just hear their life stories and just pause and think about, okay, well, yeah, Zoom might totally blow their mind, and they will totally use it and excel at it.
Yeah, it's a lot of change. It's a lot of adapting. But I will say, it seems to me, and maybe this is because I'm older now, but it seems to me that like 65 to 75 or so, even older than that, it doesn't seem as old as it did 20, 30 years ago. You notice that too? Like, I remember when my grandparents were 65 and older, they just seemed older than my parents do at 65, 70 years old.
Yeah, I think, in general, our country is moving to a place of acceptance of older age. And so I think that makes an impact. 85 is the new 65, and folks are also working longer or finding second careers or going on to volunteer later in life and continue to use their skills, raising grandkids or great grandkids. I think all of these things are kind of pushing that older population to actually seem or appear younger than they are. And I think it's great. I think, no one wants to just retire and just sit at home and never be heard from again and not feel like you're contributing to life. You still want to be involved, just in a different way.
Going back to the cost of living, with what we touched upon, a lot of that is, especially in the state, is food insecurity. That's a big issue that we're dealing with. The Vermont Food Bank does its part here in the state. We have our Veggie Van Go every month where cars just line up and wait, and they come through and they get their food to go. We've seen, has this been, obviously with the inflation and the pandemic, we're seeing more food insecurity now?
Definitely. We're seeing families access some of these resources who we never would have seen before, but who qualify, dual earner households, and, definitely our older population too, whether it be food stamps, food banks, community meals. People are trying to make ends meet and cut back where they can, and accessing these programs is one of the places where you can do that. And that's what these programs are there for. And that's one of the things I like about my job, is just informing people like, hey, did you know about this resource? And oftentimes people will say, well, yeah, but that's not for me. I don't qualify for that. I don't need that. And I think just taking the time to really talk through people's situations with them and help them realize, no, that this is for you to get through this hard time. And, hopefully later when you're doing better, maybe you can make a donation to that community agency, or you can volunteer there. But making sure that folks take advantage of the support when they need it is really my main goal when I come into work every day. And working to help people not feel stigmatized by accessing those supports. We all need help sometimes, whether that be a meal or a counseling session.
One of the cool things that I enjoy when I'm out there volunteering for the Veggie Van Go is the people who are picking up for their neighbors, their friends that they know maybe can't get there, can't do it themselves. And I feel like this pandemic has really strengthen the fact that, yeah, okay, we're divided. I mean, if you turn on the TV, you can see that. But reality is that when your neighbors need you to count on you, I think because you can't really count on anybody else, they'll come through for you. And that's kind of one of the cooler things that I see.
Yeah, I think you get to see the community connection, the community engagement, and that to me is one of the things that makes Vermont the most special and makes the Gifford community special, as we are there for each other. That is something you can count on. And it doesn't matter you have different beliefs or different politics, we are still going to be there to help each other out and get each other through hard times.
And we have information on the Veggie Van Go program on our website, giffordhealthcare.org. You can check that out. You talked about the aging population, but their children, their grandchildren. And in many cases, some cases, maybe you can shine a better light on that. They become caregivers for their grandparents or parents, or maybe there is some outside help to become caregivers. And considering all the factors we just talked about, there's probably a lot of strain on those folks right now.
Yeah, there is. Moving from the role of daughter to caregiver or son to caregiver, child to caregiver is tough. It's a lot. Can create a lot of conflict within that relationship. You have to make decisions about your career. You may be raising a family of your own. You may have to consider a move across the country or back to where you grew up. Lots of decisions, lots of stress and strain. And I think, recognizing that lots of other folks are going through that too, and finding some connection and some support in that caregiver community can be extremely helpful. I know at Gifford, we have a caregiver support group that we run that folks can attend either in person or virtually, whatever's easier for them. Because we do recognize, if you're taking care of someone with Alzheimer's or dementia and you can't leave them alone for the hour to come to the caregiver group, we want you to still be able to access that group and that support. That's important for you to not feel alone, and to gather, some tips and tricks from that community of things that worked for them and how to take care of yourself while you're taking care of someone else. I think we've been talking about this idea of caregiver burden for some time now. But again, COVID really kind of drew that out as far as, folks not having income, paid caregivers not being able to come into the home anymore, and families having to take over. And now what we're seeing with a lot of the, private agencies is a lack of staff, not having enough staff, even if you can pay for the care, having a hard time finding the care because the staff just isn't there. And especially challenging again in Vermont because of our rural setting, and maybe the agency that has the caregivers doesn't come to that part of Vermont.
Yeah, you're saying that there are over 100 beds offline in Vermont right now?
Yeah, so that is the average going rate these days in Vermont. 100 nursing home beds that would be available that are not available due to staffing. So due to the facilities not having the nurses, the LNAs, et cetera, to take care of the folks who live there. 100 beds, which in a small state like Vermont is a big number.
My name is Quinn McDonough. I am a registered nurse at Gifford Medical Center. I found Gifford as part of my clinical studies at VTC. And coming here, I immediately felt like this was a place that I wanted to continue my education. So I'm placing IVs. I'm getting more hands-on experience. I've really felt like that I've been able to learn so much so quickly because everybody wants me to learn and wants me to do my best.
The staffing shortages, they've been well documented with especially in the healthcare setting with nurses, but it's everywhere. There's just a shortage of workers everywhere. And when the burden does fall on the family, it's not a paying job. You're doing it because you care and and it's your loved one, and you probably would do it without hesitation, but the income's going to come somewhere. And so your one family member is disposed, being that healthcare giver, that takes away one more person so I don't know, it's very difficult. It would be very difficult to be a caregiver. And that's why, when you talk about taking advantage of some of these support groups and programs, because boy, can that be a mental strain on folks.
Yeah, it's a lot. And like you said, it's kind of a catch-22 for every family caregiver we have kind of giving up their career to do that. We have one less person, maybe in the healthcare field often, who's, pulling back from their nursing duties to take care of mom and dad or their spouse or whoever.
And there's just not a magic wand. I mean, there's just no one solution, right? That can, because if we knew it, I mean, I would imagine we'd execute it at this point because of the shortages that we have in healthcare across the board. I don't know what that is I don't know if there's incentives.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of small things that go into that. And a lot of it comes down to community organizing, which very much plays into the social work field, uniting caregivers to share their experiences and decide, hey, we want to go talk to our representative about this. There should be some funding for this. We could try a pilot project. Why are we not driving more students towards the healthcare fields? There's plenty of jobs and it pays well and it's a rewarding career. So lots of small ways to make a difference over time. Easy to feel overwhelmed by these big problems. And I think that's one of the things that social workers do so well is we break these big structural societal issues down into just little programs, like we're going to have a caregiver group here. We're going to have a memory clinic here. We're going to do Veggie Van Gogh, things like that, that do help and make a difference over time.
Have you seen any response, reaction from the state that would be positive or looking like, they understand the situation, or are we kind of left to our own devices, as you kind of talked about, with trying to figure out other ways to get around it? I mean, I know you talked about groups getting to their representatives and getting to them and telling them about the issues. You think that's hit home?
Yeah, I think in some ways we're trying to address it. I know a big focus for the state right now is housing, and that makes a big difference to, older Vermonters struggling financially. Just having that secure place to live for the next year can make a big difference. I think, there's agencies like the Council on Aging who especially focus on this older population and how to keep people in their homes. There's a huge home share program in Vermont. We've come up with really creative ways to try to take care of people where they need to be taken care of. As far as the shortage of folks to work in some of these facilities, that I don't know if that's a state focus. If it isn't, I think it definitely should be.
It's not an easy job, but there are people out there who have that innate ability to share that care and for folks. But it's tough to, with everything we've gone through the last couple of years, it's more stressful now than ever. And I guess that ties into the mental health aspect of things, right? If people were more mentally, could work past whatever those mental issues are, then maybe you'd have more people wanting to get back into that field. Because I think we've had a lot of people who have been in that field but left.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a stress. It can be a stressful field. And I think making sure that we're taking care of the team that we have in the field now is essential. We have to keep those people and we have to find ways to bring more in with us. The institutions they work for, the companies they work for have to support their employees. It's essential. It's a naturally stressful field, but it's a really rewarding one too. So I think finding that balance of doing the hard work, but taking care of yourself and feeling taken care of by your employer is really important.
So let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about the holiday season. We're recording this podcast. This is our December podcast, so the holidays are here. We talked about it a little bit last year around this time about your mental health for the holidays. And given everything that we've been talking about the last half hour or so, the holiday season is a great time. It is time to be with family. It is a time to reflect. But it can also be difficult for folks, triggering for people who don't have families or who have suffered great loss or tragedy or pressure, to be happy. And even though inside they're not, it's so while there are those of us who are relieved and happy to get there, we have to be mindful of other folks who maybe not feel that way.
Yeah. The holidays can bring out a lot of stress, and they also happen at the end of the year, and we're reflecting on 2022 and everything we went through, and maybe the goals we set we didn't achieve. It's a time of reflection, which can be good and can be challenging. Folks who don't have families to spend it with or who have lost loved ones, that's always a challenge. Folks who don't want to spend it with their given family, that can create a lot of stress. Feeling pressured to buy gifts for everyone and cook these grand meals, and with food being so expensive, I think it's important to make the holiday season what you want it to be. You don't have to get everyone a gift. You could make homemade gifts, or just make it about spending time with the people that you want to spend time with. And if you don't want to spend time with someone, don't. Take care of yourself. If there was a tradition you did with a loved one who's no longer here, if it feels good to do it, do it. And if you want to make a change, make a change. I think just having the patience with yourself and knowing this is an especially challenging time of year for mental health. And we feel that pressure to, be happy and be a Hallmark movie. And that's just not everyone's reality some years, and that's okay.
And maybe it's a good time to focus on mental health with the year coming to an end and a new year starting. And I think people really don't understand how, we've set aside this time for our physical health, right? We have a physical every year, and, to really emphasize how mental health, a mental health checkup is just maybe more so important than your physical exam every year. And getting a touch on that and kind of erasing that stigma.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, mental health is healthcare. You've got to come in and talk about these things the same way you'd talk about, pain or a heart issue or whatever it may be. Just as important to come in and talk about, I've been feeling really sad, or I don't like the same things anymore that I used to like. I don't want to talk to my friends anymore, and I don't know why. Just coming in and talking about that can make a huge difference. And I think now in our virtual world, lots of different places to get that support from, all kinds of online telehealth that you can access. If you live somewhere rurally and hopefully have good enough internet to access that. Lots of options that didn't used to be there.
Before we wrap up, do you have something that you're looking forward to, or a goal that you've set for yourself for the new year, career-wise, or in terms of what you'd like to see for the mental health of our community going forward? Is there a goal that you've kind of set for that?
Yeah, so I think my focus for 2023 is I'm moving into or adding a bit of a new role to my role, which is to be our outpatient palliative care coordinator, which I'm really excited about. Gifford has this huge last mile ride fundraiser that we do. And I'm very excited to be a part of that team and really focus on palliative care for our Gifford community. So my goal for 2023 is really to maximize and revamp those services for the communities that we serve. And so I think just continuing to grow this field and to grow our, to really kind of solidify our place in healthcare is an important goal for me.
Well, Emily Pizzale, thank you so much for joining us on the Gifford Provider Podcast for this month. Some very helpful information, but also helpful to talk about some of these issues right now that are plaguing our aging population, a population that is going to double in size by 2060. So we, and living in Vermont here, that's very important information for us to know, considering we're one of the older states in the country, and there's these shortages of essential care and workers that we need. So hopefully the messages start to get out there and we can see some changes in the works to help us get through this time, because that population that we're talking about, that 2060, that's us, right?
It is.
Don't want to think about it right now, but that's us. So again, Emily, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Gifford Provider Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like on our social media platforms as well. Do a search for Gifford Healthcare and leave a review, a 5-star review if you can, on Google, Apple, Amazon, and Spotify. Take care. We'll see you next month.